Hey guys, Zom Fox here, and today it is time to do the final regular season week review for the 2025 UFL season. It's wild, but it's over. The regular season is done. This was the final week of regular season action, and now we have the last three playoff games, the two conference championships, and the actual championship left. So let's get right into it with the Friday night football game between the Battlehawks and the Defenders. This is a wild one. So, for those of you who didn't actually watch this game started for about a drive and a half, and then snap of the fingers, rain just started pouring, there was lightning around, and it was delayed for about 47 minutes exactly. Then the game resumed with a full-time running clock, and it was a wild game. It was a bad weather game. The first half was real bad weather because the field was just so wet, and it was a bit better in the second half, but overall, St. Louis got the win. Now, no starting quarterback played, though starting running backs for DC played. St. Louis did not see Jacob Sailors play. A lot of the main receivers did play. Overall, though, Brandon Silvers looked really solid. He only threw 10 passes, or 8 passes, but he looked really solid when he did throw. As for Mike DeLillo, he was alright. He was okay. He threw the ball a decent amount of times. He was pretty accurate, but overall, he wasn't incredible. It was a bit of a downgrade compared to Teamu, but a lot of that is the fact that this game was, with the weather delay. Important thing is DC's kicking game is what really cost him. Matt McCrane straight up missed one field goal and had another field goal that got blocked. If those two kicks go in, there's a very good shot they end up winning the game. As St. Louis never scored in the second half, and DC did get the one touchdown, but overall DC won this. It didn't matter that St. Louis only went 1 of 7 on third downs. It didn't matter that DC almost had a 2-1 time possession. DC couldn't get it done. We'll see if they get it done next week or on the road against St. Louis for the conference championship game, but that was this one. Now, the second game was the Roughnecks Panthers. Now, another game that had a delay. This one was a delay not for the actual game, but on watching on ESPN. It was delayed for literally about half the damn time of the game. You had to watch it on ESPN News or ESPN Plus before it went on to ESPN. Overall, Jalen McClendon did play for the Roughnecks. He had a solid game. It wasn't nearly his best game. He did a lot of short passes. And like I've said, for how great a quarterback he is, his biggest weakness are those short passes because he just basically can't turn off his arm. And it kind of hurt him a lot of missed throws there. But it was still better than Rocky Lombardi and Danny Etling. Now, important note that the very first drive Rocky Lombardi had, it was a great one, but then the center missed the snap. He just threw it to the left of Rocky, got fumbled, and Houston recovered. Then they got a touchdown the next drive. Penalty got checked or challenged for CJ, and it worked. So Michigan could have won this game had the first quarter basically gone their way, but overall they had a shot at the end with Danny Etling, and Etling threw one more just straight gut punch interception. If that is the last we see of him this season, it is a fitting way for him to end this season. To most Panthers fans, seeing him throw that terrible interception. As for Rocky, he did show some promise, and I think that if you're a Panthers fan, I think you kind of would rather see him back than Danny, because at least with Rocky, this was his first start and first time playing, whereas Danny, he's played for a while, yet we know what he is, so at least there's some good things to the Panthers. Overall, though, Houston won. They somehow finished 5-5, so that's the second game. Now, the first of the two Sunday games, we have the Renegades-Brahmas. Take a guess who won this game and that it wasn't close. If you guessed the Renegades crushed the Brahmas, then congrats. Yeah, it was bad. Kellen Mond showed one last time that he is not a quarterback that is fit at this level, the NFL level. It's just not great. Perez, he had a great game. Now, it's too little too late. Again, it's a great performance. So basically, it's like a couple of best games minus the awful interception and the fake spike. We're in games that basically didn't matter. So, it's a good way. If this ends up being his final game in spring football, it's a great way for him to, ride off in the sunset. If he does come back next season, which, again, seems like a legit possibility. I know Renegades fans going to be kind of split in that. Overall, though, he had a great final game for the season. He jumped Teamu for the passing crown for this season. Overall, though, inconsequential game, didn't mean anything. It just guaranteed the Brahmas would shatter the record for worst point differential in the ultra-modern spring football era. Last game was the Stallion Showboats. Yikes. 46-9. So it was almost a repeat of that classic Todd Haley meme. If you know, you know. All that really needs to be said is Jamar Smith at the moment is the best quarterback in the league. Right now, it's hard to pick a QB better than him. Perkins is going to be coming back from an injury. Teamu, again, for how good his stats are, a lot of his system. At the moment, Jamar's been the most consistent quarterback week to week after becoming a starter for the team. Had another great game. Well, a great half, and then Peasley came in and was solid. As for Dresser, Wynn, and T-Will, not great. The fact is the Showboats are probably going to have to overhaul that quarterback room entirely. The only guy I would even argue bringing back is T-Will, and that's only if he's a QB3 for the team. We know it's going to be a big talking point in the offseason is do the Roughnecks and or Showboats relocate? And if this is the end of the Showboats, it's a fitting way to go out. They got absolutely hammered once again by Birmingham at home in front of a crowd. Rough game for them. Stallions went 9 of 12 on third down percentage, just insane. So congrats to Birmingham for finishing with 7 wins. Still broke the record for most losses in a season. That's not even counting what they could happen in the playoffs. But Showboats, they finished the same as last year, 2-8. Now, as for the attendance this week, honestly, aside from the obvious glaring issue, that being Memphis, the attendance was actually pretty solid this week. Again, DC's attendance would have been the best of the entire year for them had it not been for the weather. The weather, again, this is one of the very few times where weather is a legit excuse. Again, there's blaming the weather, and then there is, weather that was going on the entire day and legit caused a delay for the game, which it did, obviously. Had that been better, this game probably hits over 15K. Again, this weekend they had some special with ticket fees, and it overall worked. Even with those issues, DC still managed to have their third best game of the season. So when you consider that, despite the weather, that's an impressive number. San Antonio's near 11,000. There's going to be a big talking point when I do that video about Houston and Memphis. The fact that San Antonio put out over 10K in their last game of the season, which again was a meaningless game and was only for them to confirm that they got the record for essentially being the worst team in this era of spring football history. San Antonio, man, you deserve better. Hopefully the team is better next year because this is a great crowd. The fact that San Antonio's single worst game of 9,200 was over twice as good as the Memphis Showboats' best number of the season is insane. So, great market. Memphis's number, terrible. Again, it was technically their second best of the season, so, not even a halfway golf clap, I guess, for that. It's still terrible. The fact is that while 10K is definitely a number we want to see, the bottom line is 5K is that absolute bare minimum you should be crushing. The fact that they couldn't even put a single game above 5,000 really says a lot about how bad this market is. How good the team is, be damned, because again, if the Brahmas are crushing you in attendance, look, you eliminate their week 1 game, it's just insane. And then the Panthers, the single best number of the entire season by a country mile. It was the 27-9 by St. Louis, considering that had no season tickets. This crushed that. We did not expect this. We knew this was going to be the best attended game for them, which already is crazy because they broke the record for attendance 3 times out of 4 games. They had to open extra seats for this game. And to have it hit over 16K is just absurd. That is by far the most impressive number. In fact, if you date back to last season, it is still the second most impressive number in the history of the UFL, with only the 40K by St. Louis being more impressive. Again, when you judge how good a number is, it isn't by the exact number. It's by the market, what's expected versus what actually happens. DC, we expected this number to be above 13, 14K before the weather stuff happened. When the weather stuff happened, we're like, damn, they're probably going to have their worst attended game all season. Still had their third best, right? Michigan, I expected their attendance to improve, but I thought it was going to end up averaging a little over 10K. It finished averaging over 11.5 on the season. In fact, the only game that was under 10K was their third consecutive home game, and I do believe that was a Friday night game because they had back-to-back Friday night games at week 3 and 4. That was their worst game. Every other game was above 10K. That is insane. Arlington, last year or this year, couldn't do that. Birmingham couldn't do that. DC is really the only other team that's done that, and granted they never had a game under 10K, but when you're matching DC, it's a big deal. The fact is there's a legit argument to be made that Michigan has become the second best market in the league overall, and in terms of a fan base, I think most people would honestly agree on that. If you go and look at things like forums, or you do things like Upper Deck EPAC, you can pretty much guarantee that most fans that you're going to find are Battlehawks or Panthers fans, followed by DC and Birmingham. So you got to give a lot of credit to Michigan. The guys that ended up being in charge of the marketing for that team, they did their job. They may be the only guys who really did outside St. Louis, but they did their job. Absurd number to see. We expected that to be good, but I honestly thought it was going to be 14,000, which would still be an insane number. 16, I mean, seriously, that is the second best number in UFL history that isn't St. Louis. Just think about that for a second. For how good DC is, DC's only had one game that was better than it, and it was by less than 50. Unbelievably impressive. Now, the one thing I want to talk about before we go to TV ratings, which I'll talk about this more in the offseason, is the overall attendance on a landscape since we're done with the regular season. When you look at it last year, this year, a lot of numbers are down. Of course, Birmingham is down by a pretty decent margin. Arlington is essentially the same. But as I mentioned before, Arlington's attendance this year is actually better than last year. True openers usually have that kind of arbitrary inflated number, which last year did. The 14,000 was a heavily inflated number because of the Birmingham game. First game since the merger. Eliminate that game, their attendance drops pretty drastically to being in that 8K to 9K range. So Arlington's attendance was legitimately better this year than last year. So again, congrats to Arlington. Birmingham, it was disappointing. Now, yes, the 4,700 number was an aberration. We all knew it. Well, people who didn't hate the league knew it because it was 11 a.m. on Mother's Day. But eliminate that game, they basically averaged about like 9,800, which is still a bit down from last year, though. Again, big difference, consistency. Birmingham had 2 games that were in the 7K region, whereas this year you only had the one under, which was obviously the Mother's Day game, and the rest of the season was over 9K. Consistency, this year wins. DC, it was down this year. It still wasn't bad, just like St. Louis was down, but still really solid. So you have 2 teams that were a little bit down, basically the same. Arlington, honestly, better than last year. Michigan, way better than last year. Houston and Memphis, yikes. And then San Antonio, really impressive. The fact that their Week 5 game ended up breaking their non-Week 1 or non-opener in 2023 record is impressive. Yes, it was an aberration for even this season, but even without that, they still averaged over 9,500. And again, you eliminate the big one last year. Yes, they had over 11K every game, but this team was so much worse than last year's, obviously, and yet they still had this amount of people in their games. Impressive. TV ratings, mixed bag. So, the Friday Night Football game, honestly, that's a really solid number. Now, yes, we know DC versus St. Louis is basically one of your 2 really big marquee matchups, arguably 3 at this point. I think most people would agree that a St. Louis-Michigan game would be in that same realm, but St. Louis-DC is a big deal. Of course, you know the FS1 game earlier this season. This 670 was like the highest Friday Night Football number in a while, so really impressive there. Now, the Saturday game on ESPN, really awkward. Again, it wasn't even on ESPN at the time. The ESPN3 stats aren't added into it. So, how much do you judge that 320? It's hard to tell, but even if you view it as just the face value, yes, it's a bad number, but it's not even the second to worst ESPN number because there was 2 Memphis games during the season that were even worse than 320, as there was one that averaged like exactly 300 and then one that averaged like even less than that. San Antonio versus Arlington, it was an earlier ABC game. Yes, that's a bit disappointing. That's one of the lower rated ABC games, one of the 3 worst performing games of the season, but still a solid number. And the Birmingham-Memphis game, again, kind of on par with what we got a lot this season. Especially considering how literally meaningless all of these games are. You got to give some credit for that one, especially considering that Michigan did, in fact, lose to Houston. It meant that Birmingham-Memphis game had legitimately 0 importance on the entire season. So seeing that game still have that kind of number is pretty solid. Overall, last year to this year, the numbers are down basically across the board to varying degrees. Fox is down. It's not just Friday Night Football. Even regular Fox was definitely down. ESPN was down a bit. ABC was the closest. Again, the number's going to be dragged down a little bit by this game. Overall, ABC was very consistent last year. We'll see how the playoffs do. But again, weird season where the attendance, if you eliminate Memphis and Houston, the attendance was actually pretty solid this year. Especially when you got to remember that heading into the season, the big deal was that over 50% of every single team's season ticket holders did not renew their tickets. So that's why we expected basically a drop among every single team except Michigan. That was really the only team that I thought was guaranteed to go up. But there was a couple teams that if literally something goes right, it could. Michigan was the only team I legitimately was like, it's going to go up. I thought Houston was going to go up too, but yikes. But I stand corrected about that one. But overall, attendance was actually pretty solid this season if you eliminate Memphis and Houston. TV ratings. You did have the FS1 number do really good. Yes, a lot of that was what matchup it was, but it's still a really solid number. So we'll see what happens next season. Again, if we do get expansion, expect there to be a regional game every single week. I know a lot of people are trying to act like it's not going to happen. It's going to happen. These networks just don't have enough time slots to do it, especially if they move the season to February. Like, I could make an entire video saying why moving back to February would be an awful idea for the league. But the point is, even if you do that, you're still going to have really nowhere to put games. Like, when you're adding a 5th game, it's just not going to happen. But we'll see. Overall, this has been Zon Fox. Make sure to subscribe and hit the bell if you're not on any videos. Expect tomorrow, probably tomorrow, maybe Thursday is going to be my playoff game predictions or my playoff bracket. Then Friday, I'll still have my game picks video. Yes, I'm still doing it because that game is actually going to predict the score and all that. So be looking for both those videos. I'll have a Friday Night Football tier list coming out within a week or two, depends on what comes out. I might push it back to the first week after the season ends, as well as my video on Memphis and Houston and whether or not they should relocate. That's going to be an important video. So be looking for all that. Again, we just had all UFL teams come out yesterday, so expect probably next week to see awards come out, or hell, even later this week. So make sure you're around for that. Think about becoming a community member for as low as 99 cents a month. You get an exclusive monthly video, team emojis, other benefits. And as always, guys, have a great night.